There comes a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when you stop trying, not because you are angry, not because you no longer care, but because something deeper awakens within you. It is the moment when your soul realizes that effort without reciprocity is not love, it is self-abandonment. And the world shifts the instant you step out of that pattern. An avoidant is not frightened by distance. Distance is familiar. What unsettles them is the absence of pursuit. They are accustomed to being the axis around which emotional energy revolves. When you try, explain, overextend, and wait, you confirm a story they unconsciously believe, that closeness is optional, that you will remain even when they withdraw. But the moment you stop trying, the story collapses. This is where psychology meets wisdom. When you detach, you are not punishing anyone. You are simply restoring the natural order. Energy that flows only one way eventually dries the source. The moment you withdraw your emotional labor, the avoidant is forced to face something they have long avoided, your autonomy. And autonomy is unsettling to those who rely on emotional distance to feel safe. Understand this deeply. They do not miss you when you beg, explain, or fight to be seen. They miss you when your presence is no longer available on demand. The silence you create by being whole is louder than any argument you ever made. It introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty disrupts their sense of control. There is a divine principle at work here. Life responds not to need, but to alignment. The moment you align with self-respect, the universe recalibrates every dynamic around you. You stop asking to be chosen, and in that stillness, you remember that you were never meant to audition for love. Love recognizes it does not require persuasion. When you are done trying, something sacred happens. You stop leaking energy. You stop explaining your worth. You stop negotiating your boundaries. And without saying a word, you communicate a truth that cannot be ignored. I am complete, with or without your validation. That truth is confronting to anyone who benefits from your emotional pursuit. The avoidant begins to feel the weight of your absence, not because you left, but because you stayed gone internally. You are no longer reaching across the emotional gap to make them comfortable. You are no longer managing their fears at the cost of your peace. And now they must face the gap themselves. This is not about revenge or awakening guilt. It is about maturity. Psychology teaches us that patterns only change when reinforcement stops. Spirit teaches us that what no longer serves must be released to make room for what does. When you stop trying, you break a cycle that could never evolve while you carried it alone. And here is the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be understood is often the moment you are finally seen. Not always by the same person, but by life itself. New opportunities, deeper connections, and aligned relationships begin to appear, not because you searched harder, but because you stood still in truth. Let this be a reminder. Walking away emotionally is not failure. It is graduation. You are not losing anyone, you are reclaiming yourself. And anyone who realizes your value only after you stop trying is revealing something important. Not about your worth, but about their readiness. Stand in your wholeness. Let your silence be peaceful, not performative. Let your detachment be rooted in wisdom, not bitterness. Because when you stop trying, you are not closing a door. You are opening the one that leads back to yourself. Detachment is often misunderstood as rejection, coldness, or emotional shutdown. But in truth, it is none of these. Detachment is the quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself in order to keep someone else comfortable. It is the moment you realize that love should never require the constant sacrifice of your dignity, peace, or inner balance. When you detach, you are not pushing someone away, you are returning to yourself. And that return is an act of deep self-respect. Many people confuse attachment with love, but attachment is driven by fear, the fear of loss, abandonment, or not being enough. Love, on the other hand, is grounded in wholeness. Detachment does not mean you no longer care. It means you care without losing yourself in the process. You stop gripping, stop chasing, stop proving, and in doing so, you restore emotional equilibrium. This balance is essential because any relationship that survives only through effort from one side is already fractured at its foundation. Psychologically, detachment shifts the power dynamic. When you are overly attached, your emotions become reactive. Your mood depends on their responses, their availability, their approval. This creates an invisible imbalance where one person becomes the emotional center and the other becomes the emotional laborer. Detachment dissolves this imbalance. You no longer hand over the authority of your emotional state to someone else. You reclaim it. And when that happens, clarity replaces confusion. There is also a deeper wisdom at play. Detachment teaches you that your worth is not measured by how hard you try or how much you endure. True self-respect emerges when you recognize that being chosen should feel mutual, not forced. When you stop overextending, you send a silent message, not of rejection but of self-honor. You are saying, I will not compete for space in a connection that should. Welcome me naturally. Emotionally healthy detachment creates space for truth. When you stop compensating for another person's avoidance, their behavior becomes unmistakably clear. You are no longer distracted by hope, excuses, or imagined potential. You see the relationship as it is, not as you wish it to be. This clarity can feel uncomfortable at first because it removes illusion. But illusion was never love, it was survival. From a divine perspective, detachment is an act of trust. It is trusting that what is meant for you will not require you to shrink, beg, or chase. It is trusting that peace is a sign of alignment, not loss. When you detach, you align yourself with a higher order, one where relationships are based on reciprocity, respect, and presence. You stop interfering with the natural unfolding of life by trying to control outcomes through emotional effort. Detachment also restores emotional balance by bringing you back into the present moment. Instead of living in anxiety about what might happen or why someone is distant, you become anchored in what is real. You notice how you feel, what you need, and what you will no longer tolerate. This awareness is empowering. It transforms you from someone who waits to someone who chooses. In this state, you no longer react from wounds but respond from wisdom. You understand that walking away emotionally is not an act of cruelty but of compassion, first toward yourself and indirectly toward the other person, because it removes the pressure of unmet expectations. Detachment allows love to exist without distortion, and if love cannot survive without you losing yourself, then detachment reveals a truth that was always there. Peace was never on the other side of trying harder. An avoidant personality thrives on control because control creates a sense of safety and predictability in an otherwise unpredictable emotional landscape. For them, emotional closeness can feel like a threat, a sudden loss of autonomy, an exposure to vulnerability that is uncomfortable or even frightening. Control becomes a protective mechanism, a way to maintain distance and keep emotional pain at bay. When you engage with an avoidant person, you are often interacting with someone whose inner world is carefully managed, where boundaries are firmly maintained to avoid feeling overwhelmed. This need for control is not about domination or malice, it is about survival in their emotional reality. But what happens when that control is no longer pursued by the other person? When the usual dynamic, where one side chases, explains, and tries to manage the relationship, is interrupted. This is where the avoidant loses their orientation. Their sense of security, which was built on maintaining emotional distance and managing expectations, begins to unravel. They have become so accustomed to steering the emotional energy, to dictating the pace and boundaries, that when that energy is withdrawn, they are left in unfamiliar territory. Imagine a ship captain used to navigating through stormy seas by holding tightly to the wheel, adjusting constantly to avoid danger. Now imagine that the crew, who usually follows every command, suddenly stops responding. The captain's control is undermined, and the ship drifts without clear direction. This loss of control causes discomfort and even panic. For the avoidant, it challenges the internal narrative they rely on, that distance is safety, that emotional involvement is a risk to be managed carefully. This moment of losing orientation is profound. It forces the avoidant to confront something they often avoid, the possibility that connection might require vulnerability, mutual effort, and unpredictability. They are pushed to reckon with the fact that their usual strategies may no longer work. When you stop chasing or explaining, you remove the familiar script. The avoidant can no longer predict how the relationship will unfold or manipulate it through withdrawal. This uncertainty is disorienting because it strips away their emotional armor. In psychological terms, this is a crisis of attachment strategy. The avoidant's learned way to cope with intimacy, maintaining control and emotional distance, loses its effectiveness. When they can no longer rely on others to fill the gaps or chase their approval, they face an internal void that is both terrifying and unfamiliar. It creates an emotional limbo where they are neither in control nor truly connected. At this point, the avoidant must make a choice, whether consciously or unconsciously. They can either retreat further into avoidance, reinforcing the distance and solidifying the protective walls, or they can begin to explore what lies beyond their defenses. This exploration requires courage because it means stepping into vulnerability, the very thing they have avoided. It demands a surrender of control and an openness to uncertainty, which is paradoxically where true connection lives. The wisdom in this moment is that control, while offering temporary safety, ultimately limits growth. Emotional safety does not come from rigid boundaries or calculated distance. It comes from being seen and accepted as you are. When the avoidant realizes that the emotional choreography they depend on has changed, they are invited to reconsider what safety means. Is it control over others, or trust in oneself? Is it managing distance or allowing closeness? This realization is rarely immediate or comfortable, but it is essential for transformation. Losing orientation forces the avoidant to develop new emotional skills, tolerance for uncertainty, acceptance of vulnerability, and the ability to engage authentically without the need to dominate the narrative. It can open the door to deeper, more fulfilling relationships where both people show up as whole, imperfect beings. From a higher perspective, this dynamic reveals a universal truth about human connection. Safety in relationships is not about controlling the other person or the circumstances, but about feeling secure enough within yourself to be present with uncertainty. The avoidance journey teaches us that control is a strategy born of fear, and that true freedom, emotional freedom, comes when we release the need to manage and instead embrace the flow of authentic connection. When the avoidant feels this shift, it is often uncomfortable, but it is also an opportunity. The loss of control can become a turning point, a moment when the walls that once kept pain out begin to come down, and something more real and alive can emerge. And that emergence is the seed of healing, not just for the avoidant, but for anyone who has ever sought safety through control rather than connection. Silence after effort carries a weight far greater than any word spoken in desperation. When someone has invested time, energy, and emotion into a relationship, and then falls silent, it signals a profound shift, one that words often fail to convey with the same clarity. This silence is not empty. It is charged with meaning, charged with the finality of a decision that cannot be undone by explanations or pleas. It is the quiet but unmistakable statement that the well of patience has run dry, that the attempts to bridge the gap have ceased, and that the heart no longer beats with hopeful anticipation. In many relationships, words are the currency of connection, but they can also become diluted through overuse. When one party constantly explains, apologizes, or justifies, their words risk losing power and authenticity. desperation seeps in, and with it, the subtle erosion of respect, both from others and oneself. Words spoken in desperation can feel like begging, and begging often signals a loss of internal strength. The moment when silence replaces those words is often the moment self-respect reasserts itself. This silence is not an absence of communication, but a powerful form of communication in itself. Psychologically, silence is the space where reflection and realization begin. When someone ceases to try, to explain, or to chase, the other person is left to confront the reality of the situation without distraction. There are no longer any justifications to soften the truth or excuses to mask the distance. Silence strips away the layers of hope and illusion, leaving only what is real. This stark clarity can be unsettling because it demands acknowledgement. If there was a chance, it is past. If there was hope, it is dimmed. The silence acts as a mirror, reflecting back the truth that words had once tried to avoid. For the avoidant, or anyone who relies on distance and control, this silence can feel like a vacuum, a sudden void where once there was emotional noise to manage. It is precisely this absence of emotional labor from the other side that creates a psychological pressure that words often fail to exert. The silence disrupts the patterns and routines they depended on. It is the absence of pursuit that destabilizes, not confrontation or conflict. This silence is also a profound boundary. It marks the limit of endurance, the point at which emotional generosity has been exhausted. Unlike a loud argument or a dramatic exit, silence does not invite further negotiation or damage control. It simply stands firm. It says, without speaking, that enough is enough. And this boundary, though quiet, carries the weight of 1,000 words that once went unheard or unheeded. The transformative power of silence lies in its ability to awaken awareness. It forces both parties to pause and reflect on what has been lost and why. For the person who has withdrawn into silence, it is a reclaiming of their own space, a way to protect their heart from further depletion. For the other party, especially an avoidant, it is a wake-up call. They must reckon with the reality that emotional connection cannot be sustained by withdrawal alone. The silence challenges them to either step into vulnerability or retreat further into avoidance. From a spiritual and philosophical perspective, silence is often the language of truth. It is the space where illusions fall away and clarity emerges. It invites stillness, which is necessary for insight and growth. When one stops filling the space with noise, there is room to listen, not just to the other person, but to oneself. This listening can reveal patterns, unmet needs, and the courage to move forward in alignment with one's own well-being. The moment silence settles after effort is not the end, but a threshold. It is a moment pregnant with possibility because it opens the door for new awareness. It reveals the limits of what one is willing to give and the necessity of honoring those limits. It is an invitation to recognize that love and connection are not transactions to be won through persistence, but sacred exchanges that require mutual presence and respect. Ultimately, silence after effort teaches a profound lesson about boundaries and self-worth. It is the quiet revolution where the heart stops negotiating for acceptance and starts standing firm in its own value. This silence is not a void but a signal, a powerful, unspoken message that change is inevitable, and that wholeness begins when trying ends. The realization that comes not when you leave, but when you stop explaining, chasing, and proving is a profound turning point in any relationship, especially with one who tends to avoid intimacy. It is often misunderstood because society teaches us that closure happens through final actions, the dramatic goodbye, the physical departure, the breaking of ties. But true closure, true inner peace, is rarely born out of external gestures alone. It is cultivated internally, In the quiet moments when you cease the exhausting cycle of justifying your worth, validating your presence, and seeking approval, when you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your energy. For too long, you may have felt compelled to justify your feelings, your actions, your very existence to someone who may not have been willing or able to truly understand or appreciate you. This effort, while often well-intentioned, can become a form of self-betrayal because it implies that your value is conditional, that you must prove your worth repeatedly to be accepted. The moment you stop this endless explanation is the moment you begin to recognize your inherent dignity. You realize that your truth does not need validation from another. Your self-worth is not negotiable, nor is it dependent on anyone else's acknowledgement. Chasing someone who is emotionally avoidant is a draining pursuit, filled with highs and lows, hope and disappointment. The chase is seductive because it offers the illusion of control. It convinces you that if you just try harder, say the right things, or wait long enough, things will change. But the truth is that chasing often pushes the avoidant further away, reinforcing their need for distance and control. When you stop chasing, you send a clear message that you are no longer willing to sacrifice your peace for the sake of maintaining a connection that feels one-sided. This cessation is not a withdrawal in anger, but a profound act of self-preservation. It says, "I will no longer run after a love that does not meet me halfway." Proving yourself, your loyalty, your commitment, your love, can become a relentless burden. It implies that love is a contract to be earned and re-earned, instead of a gift freely given and received. When you cease this proving, you cease the exhausting performance. You allow yourself to exist as you are, not as you believe the other person needs or wants you to be. This is a liberation from the exhausting effort to fit into someone else's emotional framework. It is an embrace of authenticity, which is the foundation of genuine connection. This moment of stopping explanations, chasing and proving, is often invisible to others but transformative to you. It marks a shift from external validation to internal sovereignty. You stop negotiating your boundaries and begin to enforce them. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable and start expanding into your own fullness. This shift creates a space where you no longer feel fragmented or depleted, but whole and grounded. Psychologically, this change interrupts unhealthy relational patterns. Avoidants often rely on others to chase them, maintaining distance while enjoying the assurance of being desired. When that dynamic is broken, the avoidant is faced with a new reality. The emotional landscape they controlled through withdrawal and unavailability suddenly becomes unpredictable. This unpredictability can unsettle them, forcing introspection and sometimes growth. But crucially, this change happens only because you cease to participate in the exhausting dance. Spiritually, this moment aligns with timeless wisdom about attachment and freedom. It teaches that true love and connection arise not from striving or sacrificing, but from presence and mutual respect. When you stop trying to convince someone of your worth, you embody the principle that you are already enough. When you stop chasing, you honor the flow of natural connection rather than forcing its course. When you stop proving, you affirm your authentic self, inviting others to accept you as you are or to step aside. This realization also liberates you from the heavy burden of what-ifs and maybes. Instead of endlessly questioning whether you did enough or whether they will change, you find peace in acceptance. You understand that some relationships are lessons, not life sentences. And this acceptance is the true gift you give yourself. Freedom from the exhausting need to control, fix, or save what may not be ready or able to be saved. In essence, the true moment of ending is less about physical departure and more about an internal release. It is the moment you stop playing the role of the pursuer, the explainer, and the proofer. It is the moment you start standing firmly in your own truth, allowing life to unfold without desperation or force. This internal shift is the foundation for genuine healing, growth, and the possibility of connection that is rooted in authenticity rather than exhaustion. Your wholeness is not created by being chosen, it is revealed when you choose yourself. This principle carries a profound and transformative truth that challenges the common misconception many hold, that our value and completeness depend on external validation, on someone else's recognition, approval, or acceptance. Too often, people live in a state of seeking to be picked, to be loved, to be accepted, believing that their worthiness hinges on someone else's decision. Yet, true wholeness does not come from being selected or favored by another. It is something already within you, waiting to be uncovered and embraced. Choosing yourself means stepping into your own power and recognizing that your life, your happiness, and your sense of meaning do not depend on outside forces. It is the conscious act of acknowledging your inherent dignity and deciding to honor it, regardless of whether anyone else does. When you choose yourself, you affirm that you are enough as you are, without conditions, without having to prove or negotiate your worthiness. This choice is an act of courage because it requires turning inward, facing your fears, doubts, and vulnerabilities, and still deciding to stand firm. In relationships, especially with those who avoid intimacy or emotional closeness, this choice is crucial. The avoidant often sends a subtle message that love and connection are conditional, that distance and emotional unavailability are acceptable or even preferable. When you depend on being chosen by them to feel whole, you set yourself up for endless waiting, for repeated disappointments, and for compromising your needs to fit their emotional framework. But when you choose yourself, you break free from that cycle. You stop defining your worth through their responses and start living from a place of self-respect and self-love. This does not mean you reject connection or close your heart to others. Rather, it means you approach relationships from a place of fullness rather than neediness. You bring your whole self into the relationship, not fragments patched together by approval or validation. When you are whole, you attract relationships that reflect your authenticity and respect your boundaries. The paradox is that by choosing yourself first, you create the space for genuine connection to occur, because connection thrives where there is mutual completeness, not dependency. Psychologically, choosing yourself rewires old patterns of attachment that rely on external validation. It transforms the way you relate to others by shifting the focus from "Am I enough for you?" to "Am I enough for me?" This shift creates emotional freedom. You no longer live in fear of rejection or abandonment because our sense of self is grounded internally, not externally. You begin to cultivate a stable, loving relationship with yourself, which becomes the foundation for all other relationships. Spiritually, this choice aligns with the highest principles of self-realization and inner peace. Many spiritual traditions teach that true love and fulfillment are found not by searching outside, but by awakening to the divinity within. Choosing yourself is a sacred act of honoring that inner divinity. It is an acknowledgement that your soul's worthiness is inherent, not earned, and that your happiness is your responsibility. This perspective invites a profound shift from seeking approval to cultivating presence, from craving connection to embracing wholeness. The practical impact of choosing yourself is seen in how you set boundaries and how you respond to those who may not meet your emotional needs. When you are whole, you do not tolerate disrespect or emotional neglect simply to be chosen. You no longer wait in limbo, hoping to be noticed or loved. Instead, you prioritize your well-being and make choices that support your growth and peace. This might mean stepping away from relationships that drain you, or refusing to engage in cycles of pursuit and withdrawal. Choosing yourself also transforms your internal dialogue. You replace self-doubt and criticism with compassion and affirmation. You become your own advocate, and your own source of encouragement. This self-nurturing mindset is crucial because it fuels resilience and empowers you to navigate life's challenges with grace and confidence. Ultimately, the revelation of your wholeness happens not through external circumstances, but through your own awakening to self-love. It is a journey from fragmentation to integration, from dependency to sovereignty. When you choose yourself, you discover that you have always been complete, that your value has never been contingent on anyone else's choice, and that the love you seek has been inside you all along. This realization frees you to live authentically, to engage in relationships from a place of freedom, and to embrace life with open arms and an unshakable sense of worth. Thank you for sharing this time and space with me. May your journey towards self-discovery and peace continue to unfold beautifully. Goodbye for now. Remember, your worth is already whole and always within you. In the end, the journey of recognizing when you are done trying is not a story of loss, but one of profound awakening. It is the moment when you reclaim your power, honor your worth, and choose to stand whole and complete on your own terms. This realization shifts the dynamic from endless pursuit to authentic presence, inviting true connection or peaceful separation, whichever serves your highest good. Remember, love is never about chasing validation. It is about embracing your own truth and allowing life to unfold naturally from that place of inner strength. Thank you for allowing me to walk this path of insight with you today. May you always choose yourself with courage and grace. Goodbye for now, and may your heart remain steady and your spirit free.